Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Ideas xLab's Uncovering Connection and Inclusion video podcast powered by Stitcher Studio. I'm Josh Miller, the co-founder and CEO, and I'm really looking forward to my conversation today with Robert Curran from the Louisville Ballet. Before I bring on Robert, I want to reground a little bit in part of what we're seeking to accomplish with the video podcast. When we initially designed it, we were really thinking about how we could organize and come together through dynamic conversations that were rooted in curiosity and courage as we think about what the future looks like related to connection and inclusion and aligning our vision and values in ever-changing times. And obviously, we are now more than ever in daily, ever-changing times. And so that is part of what we are going to focus on, while not exclusively in these conversations. So as we think about not only the next few weeks, the next few months, but how are we taking the long view on the future, thinking about the infinite game, infinite mindset, as Simon Sinek would say, and really thinking about how we come together around that. So I also want to thank our supporter of the video podcast, Main and Clay, for their support. That is where I'm seated right now, coming to you all on Facebook Live, or if you're watching this afterward. And I am going to go ahead and dive right in and bring on our guests. We are going to hit on some of the questions that we've talked through on our past few segments and discussions, and also bring in some new ones as we think about the future of arts and culture in Louisville and for the Louisville Ballet specifically. So Robert, I now have you on screen. Thank you so much for making some time today to come on the video podcast with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Josh, so much for everything you're doing to bring our community together.
I appreciate that. And I have so enjoyed being able to connect not only with you today, but also with Ashley and with Brandon through Instagram, through Facebook. Over the past few weeks, I think that's been a great connection point, and one that's definitely helped me mentally and physically as I'm trying to kind of work through everything. And I want to start, I've had the pleasure of knowing you since you came to Louisville and took over as executive and artistic director at the Louisville Ballet. And one of the things that I have been consistently asking people, whether or not I've known them for a long time or they're a new acquaintance, just to get to know them a little bit better, is what gives you oxygen in your work and life? And that's where I would love to start our conversation today.
Yeah, something that I brought with me from probably a very young age, but also certainly through my career as a dancer, is the thrill and the joy and the energy, the oxygen that comes from creative interaction. For me, it covers a wide range in my career. One of the most joyful aspects of being a dancer and a leading dancer, principal artist with the Australian Ballet, was the opportunity to work with a partner, to get on stage and tell a story or create a mood with a partner. The energy that comes off that, whether it's in the studio or whether it's on the stage, is something that I used to crave. It was the single favorite part of my job as a dancer, was getting to work with someone. Also getting the opportunity to work with creatives, whether they be choreographers or composers, designers. Costume fittings are some of the most fun experiences that you can have as a dancer, listening to what a designer is trying to do in service of the project, and then trying to literally fit into that. And then here in Louisville, before I even arrived on the ground, I did a deep dive into what the potential opportunities could be for me in terms of creating that energy, creating that oxygen. And it was a gold mine. Even before I arrived, I knew that there were going to be fantastic opportunities for me to create that oxygen for me in a selfish way, but also for the community, whether it be the community of artists that I was hoping to put in the room, but also for the audiences that would get to enjoy the results of that So my oxygen comes from being in a creative space. We're redefining that right now, but certainly in the studio, in the conference room, in the wardrobe, and certainly in the theater, creating those dynamic conversations about the stories that we're trying to tell, to share, and how they are going to be most effective and impactful.
That really, as you describe that, and I think about the way that the Louisville Ballet has evolved offerings, in particular over the past few years. I think about Choreographer Showcase, I think about the collaboration with KaiCad. I really see that coming through in terms of how do these creative interactions kind of expand the way that people experience dance and movement and ballet and connection. And before we started our conversation live, we were talking about, you described it as making quick pivots in this current time in terms of re-envisioning what that creative interaction looks like. Could you talk a little bit about how you, not only you individually, but you as a team are approaching that?
Yeah, as a team, the ballet has made a very quick pivot into how a new way of how we engage with our community. I was talking about this earlier today, in that our priority hasn't changed. Our priority is to serve our community. That priority still exists, but the whole paradigm has changed. And I'm thrilled to work in a sector where creativity is right at the top of the list of skills. And I think that creativity does allow for that adaptability as well, that flexibility, in order to continue to pursue a mission or a vision or core values in new ways. I think that's another inherent benefit of the collaborative approach as well. If you already have that built into you, if you have that that generosity and that humility to be in the room, not not above the room, or dictating to the room. If you have that skill, you can pivot a lot quicker and continue to keep your eye on the prize, certainly, which is service, which is creating storytelling opportunities, which is creating empathy, creating understanding, creating dialogue. If you have that that collaborative spirit, I think the pivots can happen quickly. Personally, I feel like my my inherent perfectionist, my high standards, my kind of my desire to always want to do more has been challenged in these times, whether it's as a leader or as a creator. I always feel like I never do enough in either. And being forced into isolation has kind of heightened that level of anxiety about not feeling like I'm doing enough. So reframing and assessing the way that I approach my own creativity is something that has been a constant buzz in my head for the past few weeks. As a leader of creative people, we've had to pivot internally as well. We have an extraordinary group of dancers who are so gifted and so collaborative, and they too have been forced into isolation. So how can I work with them to keep the collaborative spirit alive in them, to keep that sense of community strong for them? So that's been something that has been a priority for me, making sure that I connect with them regularly. We're teaching, enjoying body conditioning classes and ballet bars on a daily basis, all coming together via Google Meets to do what we do normally every day from 9 to 11, which is, get in touch with our bodies, get in touch with the tool that we have to create the art that we create, to create the opportunities for empathy and growth and dialogue. So that has been another fun pivot.
I like the description that you used of reframing and assessing your own creativity. I think that is something, whether it's specifically thinking about creativity or like you were talking about being, a perfectionist, and what are those standards like, or how are you re-understanding productivity? I think for all of us, we're having to grapple with that question of, I don't feel like I've accomplished enough, or I can't accomplish things in the way that I have put this story on myself of how I'm supposed to be able to do it. And so how do we re-diagnose and kind of redefine what that looks like, kind of first in the short term, but then also how do we carry some of that forward to evolve what it looks like for us to show up after?
Yeah, and as artists too, how do we challenge those decisions? How do we make sure that there is a discourse that assesses the pros and cons, and also acknowledges some of the hurt, or some of the struggle, some of the painful necessities? How can we be of service in that way to make sure that people don't feel alone, or unusual, or like they're failing?
So I want to shift the conversation just a little bit, but it's still connected, because as I think about where we are right now, and I fully acknowledge how many people are struggling and not in a mental space to be able to conceptualize this at the moment. There is also an opportunity for thinking about how we shape what the future looks like that is more inclusive and connected. I think this has revealed so many different parts about society in terms of inequities and discrepancies, and letting people show up at, doing their remote work and seeing people in a different way. And so one of the other areas where we've been kind of engaging in this conversation is around the concept of covering. And so from Deloitte's Uncovering Talent report, that's the downplaying or hiding of ourselves, a part of ourselves at work, or you can really think about it as work or in life. And I think this is an opportunity for people to really think about, what does uncovering our best selves look like? And then how do we bring that back into the workplace, into the places where we convene with each other later? And I'd love to hear a little bit from you about if there are instances from the past where you can identify or pinpoint places of covering, and how that's evolved, and how you're thinking about bringing the full best Robert self to the table now and in the future.
Yeah, I think that as a kind of umbrella concept in this discussion is opportunity, and adversity, like what we're facing at the moment, does also provide opportunity. That reassessment of what our priorities are, when you have faced a challenge, you do. I believe a lot of people open up their minds to possibility and opportunity, and so I think that now is a great time, for us to be having conversations about what we want the world to look like. What we want the world to look like immediately, but what we want it to look like when we've recovered from these challenging times. For me personally, covering is somewhat of a new concept, and I say new in that it's maybe 12 months old as an idea in my head. I was having a conversation with one of our staff members, one of our leadership team at the ballet, in response to some of the negative feedback we were receiving from our community regarding some of our programming choices. We received a lot of negative feedback about a particular production that explored LGBTQ plus themes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember receiving some particularly horrid communications from people, and laughing at them. I remember my first reaction was laughing. And I remember this team member saying, I feel really sad that that's your reaction. I feel really sad that your instinct is to cover this up with humor, to go into a defense mechanism that maybe you don't even understand that you're employing. You know, I feel really sad that you have to do that. And it kind of exploded my mind for a second, because I was like, well, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I've got a coping mechanism, and it just comes out like that. You know, I thought it was resilience. I thought it was a resolve. I thought it was everything that it actually wasn't. So yeah, I mean, I do feel like it's been prevalent in my life. I grew up as a farm boy, a country boy in rural New South Wales. I had a passion for the arts, a passion for dance. It wasn't a sexual orientation thing, but I was definitely different. I had a, a less masculine approach to my life. You know, I had a creativity that expressed itself in ways that were not traditionally masculine. And I did have to employ mechanisms to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in my life, there were communities that didn't expect that. You know, when I went to finish my high school years, I went to a school of the arts in Sydney. So I had the opportunity um, to let go of some of that covering. But I think the intentionality in the communities that I was existing in wasn't there. You know, I think the safe space was provided. And also, you know, with Australian Ballet as a full-time dancer, living in and out of the pockets of people who have had exactly the same experience as me, I don't feel like there was intentionality. It wasn't intentional to remove that need for covering. So I feel like now is the opportunity to use that intentional approach, certainly for me personally as a leader, to make sure that I'm sensitively but intentionally asking that question when I see evidence of covering, and really making sure that I'm creating opportunities for that mind expansion that happened for me 12 months ago with all of the people that I work with. But I also see it as an opportunity in the art that we make, that we continue to express that as a concept and as a dream for the future, where your true self is safe, and beyond safe, loved and appreciated and welcomed and
Absolutely.
important.
So and thank you for sharing that. I think one of my hopes for this ongoing video podcast series is to share how many different experiences people have had with either covering within facets of themselves, or their understanding of it. And the sharing of those stories really helps us to have a space for understanding each other and those experiences a little bit better. So I appreciate that. And I wonder if there's a connection. You all were working on a Kentucky specific ballet artistic collaboration. I can't speak to all that it was, but I would love to know or hear a little bit more about some of the underpinnings of that, and how, like you talk about, you all at the ballet and many of us using the arts in different ways are lifting up stories and ways of knowing about our community that may not have been celebrated in the same way. And I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about the inspiration and also the motivation for that.
Yeah, I would say I would add one other word to celebrated, which is challenged as
Yes.
well. I think that there's a flip side to covering that that I think doesn't allow the development of a true you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that whether you feel like it's out of necessity or whether you feel like it's out of habit or peer pressure or whatever it is that you do to cover up who you are, is something that we need to challenge as much as celebrating the result of removing that cover.
Yes.
And I think that's something that motivated me to 2 years ago now to start thinking about what these Kentucky volumes could be. I struggled in a broader sense with the preconceived idea of what Kentucky is. I feel like there was never any room in the discourse for acknowledging the creativity and the versatility and the resilience over centuries that has resulted in the Kentucky that we know now. And those of us that are living in it, whether it's here in Louisville, whether it's in Paducah, whether it's in down near Pine Mountain in southeastern Kentucky, I know, and I think that we know that the story is wrong. The story that's out there is wrong, or incomplete, grossly incomplete. And so my desire was, on a broad level, to brush some of the dust off and challenge some of those preconceived ideas about what we're doing here and who we are here. In terms of each of the individual characters, it's a constant hope, focus that those characters each have authenticity and that each serve a purpose in and of themselves. And indeed, the main character in Kentucky, all of the volumes, is actually a dancer with Louisville Ballet. And I say that because, yes, he's a dancer with Louisville Ballet, but his character is a dancer in Louisville Ballet. And he himself is making decisions about what his future is going to hold. Does he listen to the preconceived ideas? Does he listen to the incomplete stories and make a decision to go elsewhere? Or does he pay attention, consciously or subconsciously, to the centuries of history that have led to him? So making sure that character is really authentic as well, and any of the covering that is deliberately included in that character is challenged the right way, so that we all can learn. We can learn from the challenges and take pride in the celebration.
Whether it's kind of this broader lens of Kentucky or Louisville narrative specifically, we've been working on the Unknown Project, which is related to race and using arts and culture to support healing and reconciliation. I think it will be very interesting to see, especially as we come out of the next few weeks, the approach that different arts and culture-based organizations play in kind of bringing our collective entire state together, and how that narrative gets lifted up and celebrated and challenged. And
we're all going to do it very differently. We're all going to do it very differently, which is fantastic. I mean, there are things that I can achieve in the ballet context, in the ballet construct, that the orchestra can't achieve. There are things in the orchestra construct that the ballet can't achieve. But I think if we are, and I believe we are, aligned in celebrating what makes where we are, what we are, then the collective voice can start to do that reframing for us.
I completely agree. And I think there's a lot of, and it's already been demonstrated, but a lot of interest in breaking down silos and thinking about how there's kind of building on energy, but also knowing that individual organizations and artists are going to carry facets forward, but they're all connected.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one opportunity that we have that we're learning so quickly right now is how to communicate to a very broad audience in a way that serves our local community. How can we use the digital platform, for example? But that's exactly what I'm talking about right now. How can we use that to make sure that people all around the world have an opportunity to learn, and whether they're learning that Kentucky exists, or whether they're learning some of those stories that will create a more complete picture. We have an opportunity in this day and age, one that is being challenged and refined and pushed and developed right now, to get out there and tell these stories in a way that doesn't necessarily involve putting a ballet into a semi-trailer and driving it to another city.
Yeah, it's been, Theo and I set up a little art station in our house that's kind of just chilling, and we kind of revisit it every day or every other day to kind of work on stuff. But one of the pieces that I did is I traced my cell phone and then have myself running out of it.
Yeah.
Because there's this, this whole kind of grappling with, you talked about this reconceptualizing what digital engagement looks like. There's so many ways to do that. Then there's the flip side of, if I spend too much time on social media and consuming, then where's that harmony of engagement and taking information in, but also kind of putting some kind of limitations or structure around it so that it's not detrimental. And I know that I have personally been kind of grappling with what that looks like over the past few weeks.
Yeah, and in what ways is the technology in service to us, as opposed to us being in service to the technology? I feel like that creative oxygen, as we talked about earlier, has got to be the priority. What ends up existing and inhabiting those digital spaces needs to have come from a place full of that oxygen. Otherwise, it won't be impactful at all. We will never be able to replace the live interaction experience. I think that's another lesson that we're all learning right now, that you and I can be talking right now through this platform, but it's not the same as when we're in the room with each other, and when body language, when physical touch can be involved. So, you already lose some of that authentic engagement, but if the art itself oxygen soaked, I keep going back to that, then when it arrives on that digital platform, it won't be impactful. So striving for that balance is really important.
One of the things I loved when we did the Eclectic Eccentrics performance on Friday that was live, we used Zoom, but Ashley Thursby and Brandon Raglan from the Louisville Ballet performed a piece. They did like a trade-off in the middle of the song. We switched from one video to the other, so they were in different spaces but performing this collective piece together.
Yeah.
And so it was this kind of like, we're just going to test it and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But it was great to just know that there are these blended ways that we can make that happen.
Yeah, very much so. I think one of the great things that the ballet has discovered in these challenging times is that we have this enormous reservoir of work and art that has been created, that already is there ready for us to employ, to bring out again and use in a new way, give a new life to on this digital platform. And that authenticity of the creative process that created those works still exists. How can we reignite that? How can we push that forward?
Unleash it in a new way. Yeah.
Exactly.
So can you talk about, I just saw, I think it was yesterday, I saw the April schedule posted for all of the virtual offerings. So could you talk a little bit about the ballets and your approach to April and the virtual engagement piece. And then also, if there have been conversations that you've played a role in, not just with the ballet, but kind of with the broader arts and culture community that has either adapted ways of working or learnings that you think that other people could benefit from kind of thinking about or hearing as they're conceptualizing what the next month or two looks like.
Yeah, I feel like the ballet obviously has a focus on service, on maintaining that sense of community. One thing that I personally have learned, and I do feel like it's reflected in the way the ballet is getting content out there, and that is, it sounds so obvious, but right now I think it's easy to forget that your body is your body, and you need to invest in it and love it and try as hard as you can in these challenging times not to neglect it, not to plug in all the time. And and I say that in the digital technology sense, spending some time investing in the cells that make you up is really important. We all, whether you're a dancer or not, we all express ourselves with our bodies. We express ourselves through our facial expressions, through the way we use our hands, through the way we dress. We all express ourselves with this physical being, and spending time with that physical being just for the sake of spending time with that physical being is a really good thing to be doing. And I personally spent the first 2 weeks of this isolation, this social distancing, I spent it with the wrong focus. I spent it with an entire focus on, getting in front of my computer. Yes, communication's very, very important, doing all of that, but how can we as the ballet, and how can I help people express themselves with their bodies? How can I help people connect with their bodies? I think it's a really important thing for us to be doing right now, especially when the sun's coming out. Yes. And we can hear the birds singing, and springing. I think that the foundation for our expression as human beings, but certainly as artists, is our physical being.
I know that even getting back to the first week of however we're collectively referring to the pandemic, social distancing, remote work, all of those things, even just going, putting your cell phone down and going and sitting by the river, or just making space within the day. And then also that more fundamental question to me of sitting down to actually think about, like, what are the things as an individual that I need to fill me back up?
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what you're describing in terms of how are you considering the way that you're giving that to not only your physical body, but your mental, emotional, social. All of those things are going to be how we come out of this pandemic as stronger people.
Yeah, and also for people, and I'm going to say people less fortunate than me, that are struggling. Yes. That are struggling from a mental health perspective, that are struggling from a physical health perspective, that rely on a sense of community, rely on the platforms that we provide for their daily kind of fix and their daily kind of uplift, so that the remaining 22 hours or 23 hours are more productive, maybe, or maybe even just more bearable. I feel like that with that sense of community in the physical sense stripped away from us right now, anything that the ballet can do, or that I can do to help people less fortunate than me, is incredibly important. Yes, we all need to invest in our health, but there are those of us that are more challenged than others, and they rely on us for fuel to meet those challenges that they're facing.
And so as you think about that facet specifically, is that part of the reason you all have created such an interactive virtual schedule for April?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the reasons are broad, you know, and the scope of the empathy that we're trying to demonstrate is broad as well. You know, whether it is around what we were just talking about, or whether it's around our young students in the school that no longer have that face-to-face interaction with their peers at school, also no longer have that face-to-face interaction in the studio. How can we help them navigate this these challenging times by maintaining a constant for them, which is their ballet family, and you know, the dancers as well. They are a segment of our community that I am trying to help stabilize, you know, through digital offerings. It's definitely the driving force behind our desire to get content online. Our community engagement programs, educators, trying to make sure that educators and that parents have ways that they can keep their families engaged and their days full, and their sense of joy and satisfaction maintained.
Yeah, I think it's been so interesting to see the different ways, you mentioned families, that families have come together to get creative and also use time kind of constructively. Hannah tagged me in a tweet that was a video of a family that rewrote one of the songs from Les Mis as a COVID-19 specific song, talks about their grandmother in isolation and all these things.
Yeah.
But then they perform it together and they do such a good job.
Yeah.
But you think about all the different layers of how that interaction must have supported them as a family in coming together and being creative. And I've really just enjoyed seeing the different ways that people are practicing that and doing things that their family wouldn't have normally done together.
Yeah. I've particularly enjoyed watching one of the principal dancers of the Royal Ballet giving his little ones, he has 3 little kids, giving them tap lessons in the front hall, and it's just been joyful watching him, you know, and he's just exposing his parenting, and you know, sometimes he wins and sometimes he doesn't, and it's just been really great to see these, you know, these families adapting, using art and creativity and expression.
So have there been, on a continuing with some of the humorful, funny notes, any like specific memes or things that people are doing that have kind of sparked a joyful moment in your day for you?
Yes, a couple of things. I love the Fat Jewish on Instagram. He is so irreverent, and he referred to his existence as his house. His house is now like Vegas. He's losing money by the minute. It's acceptable to have cocktails at any hour, and nobody knows what day it is. You know, his sense of levity through this has really sustained me. I also got and it's an ongoing thing in my family. My family is borderline apoplectic with the toilet paper issue. My dad just does not understand it, and I swear he just spends his days, you know, scrolling through the internet trying to find funny posts about toilet paper. And a friend of mine sent an image of 3 men together with these very elaborate headdresses, fully built, of full toilet paper rolls, with the quote that post-coronavirus males demonstrating their hunter-gatherer prowess to secure mates. And, you know, I'm just like, that's the kind of stuff that helps me through these times. Just that sense of willingness to laugh at ourselves, that, I mean, I went to Kroger and the toilet paper shelves were empty. So I pivoted and went straight to paper towel, grabbed the biggest paper towel, and they're still sitting there. I haven't touched one of them. Like, they're still sitting there, 3 weeks later. But, the ability to laugh at that, that aspect of us that just seems so irrational.
Yeah, it was so interesting. I went to Costco last week and I got there like 30 minutes early on accident, but didn't realize there was like a line going all the way behind the building to get in. Like, people were spaced 6 feet apart. They were counting how many people went in. They were limiting that number, but they had someone come out with paper tickets that they had allotted for all their toilet paper in stock. And they just went down the line and said, "Are you here to buy toilet paper? Here's a ticket. Are you here to buy toilet paper? Here's a ticket." And then they ran out. And this was before the store opened.
Wow.
Ran out. And it has been so interesting to understand and just see how people are responding in these different ways. So I'll also be interested, now that Derby is in beginning of September, if any toilet paper creations show up as part of Derby this year.
Good idea. Yeah, I mean, and the flip side of that too, not wanting to pivot away from the humor, is I hope we do have a kind of reassessment of that consumption element of how we exist. Like, it's pretty insane, the level of consumption. I think, well, I hope that everybody's taking stock, quite literally, of how many toilet paper rolls they purchased and how many toilet paper rolls they're going to have, when this is over, and just really assess, is it necessary?
As you think about, and reassess is a great word, over the past few weeks, have there been any, whether it's books, podcasts, quote graphics, that kind of helped you in a concise way to just like pause and say, like, wow, this is something that I'm going to kind of incorporate in the way that I'm thinking and approaching things right now, and kind of put in place as we move forward?
One habit that I used to have when I wasn't as busy as I have been the past few years is I used to be very obsessive compulsive about my calendar. I would schedule everything. When my days were empty, when I didn't have a job that had the same kind of demands on my time, I would schedule my days. And I'm getting back to that now, and I'm literally scheduling time for things that I normally would let fall by the wayside. And the reason I bring that up is, and it's no one in particular, but scheduling time for me to sit down and read. Like, I made a New Year's resolution last year, and I was successful. I have been less successful this year, but reading 52 books, that was my goal. And getting back to that now, and actually looking at my calendar, or instead of just going into that paralysis of what am I going to do now, like just looking at a calendar that has, these things planned out, has made it easier for me to invest that time in reading. And that's something that I'm really enjoying. I've got so many books that I haven't read that I really want to read. I am not so much a nonfiction reader. I definitely like to dive into a fiction book, and I have so many of them that I'm loving getting into at the moment. Just spend an hour in my 24 I've got each day, just to make a cup of tea, get a glass of water, whatever it is, and go and read for an hour.
Do you have any book recommendations for
I have
those
so
who
many
may
book
be needing
recommendations.
some to add to their list?
Oh my God, I have so many. Of ones that I've read, In the Skin of the Lion by Michael Ondaatje is a book that I come back to all the time. Every single Ian McEwan book, everyone should read. And one that I want to recommend, but I recommend with caution, is A Little Life. That is a book that tore my heart out, but I so appreciate having read it. The level of empathy that I feel like grew inside me for somebody who hasn't had the blessed life that I've had was a great result for me, coming from that incredibly painful reading experience.
Sometimes it's those books.
Yeah, it really
So,
is. I totally agree. There are so many. The Good People is another great book that I've read recently, set in Ireland. It's a really great book.
okay. Well, I appreciate those recommendations. I know that I posted about reading a book a week or two ago, and someone was like, "Oh, great! I've been looking for things to put on my reading list." So
Yeah,
I'm sure that these will be some good recommendations that they can consider as well.
yeah, please do, and let me know what you think.
So as we wrap up our discussion for today, is there anything else you have top of mind that you want to offer up to viewers, that you have questions for them, for me, or just final thoughts as we kind of end our time together today?
Yeah, I just want to put the question out there of, what do you need? What does this community need? And it doesn't have to be specific to the ballet, but certainly I would welcome any kind of dialogue that I can personally, or that Louisville Ballet can have with our community. We are going on intuition. We are working as hard as we can to serve in the ways that we have in the past, but in this new paradigm. But anything that our community needs and that they think we can deliver, I would love to hear. And I feel like in times like this, don't forget that an institution is made up of people, and that communicating with those people is another way to keep our community thriving, whether it be our Louisville Ballet community or our Louisville-wide community. There are wonderful artists, wonderful administrators, wonderful collaborators that make up the Louisville Ballet family, and I'd love to be a connector, I'd love to be a conversation starter, and I'd love to get into dialogue as well. I want to be available. So I would just ask anyone to reach out to us. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know that you're okay. And let us know how we can make your life in any way better right now.
Are the best platforms for people to do that on the Louisville Ballet Facebook, Instagram?
Facebook, Instagram. You can email us at info@Louisville Ballet. That email is checked regularly throughout each day. Our website is up and live. There are a lot of ways that you can reach us, and I would love to be personally involved with that. So you have that commitment. The community has that commitment from me that I want to be involved in those discussions. I want to hear from you, and I will do everything in my power to engage in that dialogue. But
I have so appreciated getting to spend time with you. It's been a while since I saw you in person, so at least we're having this opportunity to connect. And really appreciate your time, Robert, and what the Louisville Ballet is currently doing, both virtually and as you think about how you best support Louisville, Kentucky, the arts and culture sector moving forward. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I appreciate you too. Thank you so much.
We are going to wrap up our conversation for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Ideas xLab's Uncovering Connection and Inclusion video podcast. You'll be able to rewatch our discussion at ideasxlab.com/uncovering. Like Robert Curran said, you can reach out to him and the Louisville Ballet on Facebook, on Instagram. Go to louisvilleballet.org to engage with them. what does the community need, and to also learn about the virtual offerings that they have. I've taken a few of the Instagram and Facebook-based dance classes, movement classes, so those are things you can plug into whether or not you have taken before. Just be mindful of doing things that respect the limitations or where your body currently is. So thank you all so much for engaging with us. If you have questions, comments, you can leave them on our Facebook page, on Instagram, find me on Twitter, or email josh@ideasxlab.com, and we will see you all next time.